Sure. Janelle, I first I want to say I appreciate and respect a lot of your service in the legislature. But
not all of it.
Not all of it. Not all of it. We're going to get to that.
Okay.
We're going to get to that. And probably one of the most important issues that voters are going to be thinking about is about protection of our bodies and right to make reproductive health care decisions. And you were the lone legislator, Republican or Democrat, to vote against and give a floor speech against extending the statute of limitations for rape victims to 7 years. So it was 2 years right now in Oregon. The statute of limitation for someone who trespassed on your property is longer than the statute of limitations to protect if you have been raped. A lot of rape victims go through trauma, cannot speak to it right away, cannot address it. Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, we wouldn't even have lawsuits against these folks if there wasn't statute of limitations.
Is there a question coming?
You stood up. You not only voted against extending protection, statute of limitation for rape victims to 7 years. You gave up and you stood on the floor and gave a floor speech, and it's I think OPB covered it, on protecting, essentially making an argument to protect rapists. Republicans voted unanimously for that.
Is there a question coming?
So giving the context so that the question can be understood, why would you vote against extending the protection of rape victims, the statute of limitations, to 7 years?
So we had a discussion in our Judiciary Committee about what it means to ensure justice in our justice system. And what we were finding in that conversation was that there was a patchwork for victims. It wasn't the same for certain types of claims. And I don't have a very strong memory of everything that was discussed, but I do remember how I felt. And I felt that if you couldn't approach justice in a way that was very clear and understandable for everyone involved, and if, as I think that was the testimony, if the longer things went, the less likely it was for a victim to receive justice, then we were providing, as a legislature, false hope. And we were providing a situation where people could neither seek justice fairly nor could they defend themselves fairly. And you, as an attorney, should know that the system should work. Our goal should be that it works for everyone, and that it is practical and it is simple to address when there is a dispute between two people or two entities, or multiple entities for that matter. And so one of the techniques in the legislature is to cast a vote of no, not because you believe that there's something fundamentally wrong, or not because you believe that this policy shouldn't pass, but you signal that something is wrong. And everybody on that committee knew, I believe everybody on that committee knew that there was unfinished work that the legislature needed to do. And I wasn't willing to punt. And I wanted the Senate to have the conversation about what was wrong. And they did. I didn't I didn't engage in whatever the additional conversations were. I just knew that, and Jennifer Williamson, I think, was the chair of the committee at that time. I think she acknowledged in our deliberations that day that things were a little bit out of whack and we probably needed to tidy up some of our legislation. So that was simply it. So we passed it, and and my colleagues told me, like, Janelle, only you could have said what you said and forced us to clean up what was...
Do you still stand by that vote, or would you vote differently if that came up again?
I don't know what has changed since then. I know I'm probably a more sophisticated legislator now, and maybe I would have, there are other tools. I could have said, how about we not hear this on the floor until we make this change so that everybody can vote yes? And I don't know that at that time I had that level of sophistication as a legislator, but that certainly is something that can happen behind the scenes rather than forcing a person to take it to the floor.
How did this tidy it up? Or is that too...
That's too granular of a question for me to remember, and I'm sorry.
But that was your motivation, was...
there was unfinished work, and I had asked to be on the Judiciary Committee because I felt like civil rights and the way women and the way people who are minorities were receiving justice in this state was a challenge for me. And we see that whether it's black women and domestic violence, we die. Whether it's black men and their incarceration rates, they're much higher. And everybody that I would ask would say, I can ask, do you think black people are more dangerous? No. Well, then why are our numbers so high, right? One other good example right now is public defenders. We have not solved that problem of not having not having an adequate number of public defenders in our system. And that continues to be an open wound for me.
I don't want to push this. I just want to understand. So somehow having a shorter statute of limitations on rape tidied something up.
I think what it was. Well, I think what the argument was, and I'd have to go back and look at the whole thing, but I think what the argument was situation A was 5 years and situation B was 7 years or something like that.
Right, you wanted to harmonize them.
That's all I wanted. That's all I wanted. And what we were being told was that the longer it stretched out, the less likely it was for the person to receive justice. And if the problem were a serious problem, the DAs would have said no, domestic violence would have said no, women's advocacy would have said no. They all would have said no. There's no way the bill could have passed if they didn't agree to it. That's how the legislature works. The advocacy groups will tell you no. So somewhere in there, the Senate must have made some sort of agreement, and it was fine after that. That I didn't have anything to do with it.
Okay, let's move on. Can you ask your opponent a question, please?
What do you do to relax?
I spend time with my wife and our critters.